Now, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Delilah Cohn, who's going to share with you, as you see, the story of her father, which is not a very usual story by any means. And I also teased you a little bit about what she did for her career that just shocked me when I walked into her house when I first got to know her. And there are all these pictures of bones and bodies around. And she'll tell you more about it. Delilah Cohn.
And I would be happy to tell you more about my career at the end of this and also take any questions. But I think I'll just go ahead and dive into this so that we get through it and save your questions for the end. Thanks. So to start, yeah, good, thank you. So my father, can you all hear me? Okay, good. My father, William Julius Cohn, who went by Willi, was born in 1915 to Augusta and Richard Cohn. That's my father on Augusta's lap on the left, and his older sister Hannah, between Richard and Willi's grandmother, Therese. He grew up in Stendal, Germany, a small medieval town of 30,000 people. These gates are the original entries to the town. A handful of Jewish families in Stendal had lived in Germany for hundreds of years. In fact, Willi's father on the left and his uncle Arthur on the right served in World War I. Arthur was even awarded the Iron Cross. This is the Winkelmann Gymnasium, a college prep secondary school, which Willi attended. Since Stendal had only 13 Jewish families, merely 4 of the 900 boys at this school were Jewish. Nevertheless, until the rise of the Nazis in 1933, life was normal. This is a formal photo of Willi's mother, Augusta. I'm not sure when it was taken, maybe around the time of her wedding. And this is Willi with his older sister, Hannah. And this one of Willi and a friend looking out the window. Willi's grandfather, Julius, owned this general department store, as well as a building down the street that housed his furniture store and a small 3-story factory building in the back, where a carpenter made the furniture that they sold. And that's Julius on the far right. Richard, Willi's father, who had been living in Berlin, moved into an apartment above the general department store after he and Augusta got married. Upon his return to Stendal, Richard also expanded the business and hoped that Willi would eventually take over. But Willi wanted to be a political cartoonist. He was always drawing. In late 1933, his last year of high school, Willi's sketchbook, full of cartoons satirizing Hitler, was stolen from his locker and turned into the Gestapo. He had a pretty good idea of who did it, a boy who would soon become a Nazi youth and eventually join the SS. Apparently, the sketchbook went all the way to Hermann Goering, then Minister of the Interior, and one of the most powerful figures in the Nazi Party. Goering was said to be amused and made the suggestion that Willi lay low. As a result, Willi's headmaster advised him in the spring of 1934 to disappear and not attempt to graduate. Willi redrew his political cartoons. His father burned them out of fear. We have 2 that he drew years later from memory. In the 1990s, they were even displayed at the Bible Museum in Dallas. In this one, Hitler was presumed to be in bed with Mussolini. In this cartoon, Willi depicts Hitler as a prostitute, coyly saying goodbye to Mussolini, who suddenly notices that his wallet has been stolen. In this one, young German men are being conscripted into the army. The physical exam exposes Willi as a Jew because he's circumcised, unlike the Gentiles. Following his headmaster's warning, Willi wanted to leave Germany. Needing to hide his son until Willi could get out, his father said, "Okay, if you want to go, you have to learn something." Willi's parents hid him with a forester who was a customer of their store. Willi stayed in the forest for 13 months, learning to work the land in preparation for his planned emigration to Palestine. An hour's bike ride away, Willi pedaled home in the dark on weekends to see his family. The forester, it turned out, was an abusive man. My father never forgot him, calling him an SOB in this sketch that he reconstructed from memory years later. In May 1935, he left the forester. Willi had a few months to fill before he could leave Germany. His father used business connections to ask Max Liebermann, a famous master painter, for a referral to someone Willi could study with. Willi spent the next few months hiding at home and taking a train to study with a painter in Berlin. When the painter first looked at Willi's sketchbook, he was amazed, and he asked where Willi had copied his drawings from. And after being persuaded that the work was original, the painter said, "This talent you will lose." Nevertheless, Willi made good progress working with his teacher. In emigration, many artists are torn out of their natural environment. They are so deeply steeped in their culture and their background that if they are uprooted and thrown into another environment, they are lost. Their creativity often disappears. It never did for Willi, though he was never able to make a profession out of art. Mutti and Papa, as Willi called his parents, visited Palestine in 1937, but returned to Germany feeling that at their age it would be too hard to live in such primitive conditions. Willi's first lodgings were actually in a chicken coop. None of them could imagine that things could get so bad in Germany. Nevertheless, he never forgave himself for not persuading them to stay. But how does one know when to get out? On Kristallnacht, an outdated Nazi term renamed the November pogrom in modern German usage, Nazi paramilitary forces and others rained terror across the country, smashing windows and ransacking Jewish-owned stores, homes, hospitals, synagogues, and schools, demolishing buildings with sledgehammers. On that horrific night in November 1938, Willi's father, Richard, my grandfather, was dragged from his apartment by the Gestapo and taken to Buchenwald concentration camp. There, he was tortured for 2 weeks, after which he was dumped in front of their apartment building, teeth knocked out, pants filled with excrement, and not knowing where he was. A neighbor spotted Richard standing there, dazed, and brought him inside. At the age of 61, Richard was a broken man. My grandparents told Hannah, my father's older sister, that she had to leave Germany for her own safety. Hannah eventually made her way to the US. A series of letters from Richard and Augusta revealed their attempts to secure some means of escape. Hannah had managed to make her way to England, and at first it seemed like her employer might help. Argentina seemed promising after a cousin made it there, but that path had closed. Word was that Cuba might be receptive, but the war had broken out and ships were no longer available. They sent their passport to Rudy, a relative who promised to get them visas to Palestine. Rudy took their money, never followed through, and failed to return the passports. Terrified, Richard wrote, "Rudy must absolutely send our passports back. The Gestapo had demanded it. You have absolutely to force him to send it back. Otherwise, the severest punishments will be imposed on me. For 3 months, Willi's parents lived in fear until Rudy finally returned this passport. At the top left corner, the large letter J stamped in red on the passports of Jews, who were also German nationals, stands for Jude, the German word for Jew. The passport, dated January 1939, adds the names Israel and Sarah to Richard and Augusta, their German names. In August of 1938, the Nazis decreed that all Jews bearing first names of non-Jewish origin be officially labeled with the identifier of Israel for men and Sarah for women, ensuring that authorities would know that they were dealing with Jews. To our minds, these decrees also erased those human beings as individuals. As hateful rhetoric and waves of violence continue to spread insidiously, Hannah and Willi tried in vain to get their parents out of Germany. It was too late. Evicted from their home in 1939, their stores confiscated, Richard and Augusta moved to a room in the House of Friends. In January 1940, my grandfather, mentally broken by his stay in Buchenwald, had a stroke and died. He was 63. My grandmother, then 54, moved once again, this time to the basement of a house where she hid with a friend, the president of their congregation. In 1942, after a neighbor reported to the Gestapo that Jews were hiding in that house, Augusta was deported to the Warsaw Ghetto. From there, she disappeared forever. Ultimately, a former Stendhal neighbor living in the ghetto wrote to my father through the Red Cross that he needn't write anymore. Augusta was no longer there. To his last days, Willi searched, without success, for a record of when and where his mother perished. After Richard's death, Augusta wrote how much she wanted to be with her children and comfort them. Despite her efforts to stay hopeful, she wondered if she would ever see them again. On the left is Augusta's message as transmitted via the German Red Cross from Augusta Sarah Cohn. Just as on the passport, even a Red Cross communication was forced to include the name Sarah as a Jewish identifier. She wrote, "My beloved, change of address imminent, now still unknown. Be brave, my boy. Goodbye. Remember with love, your kissing Mutti." In Palestine, Willi initially worked on a kibbutz, followed by various jobs like painting houses, unloading boxes from ships, together with Palestinian, Arab, and Greek dock workers. He also joined a sea sport club, but the club was a cover. Let me tell you in his own words and illustration about a Mossad-organized refugee smuggling operation he participated in with the club. He called it running the British blockade. It was 1939, about 9 months after Kristallnacht, about 2 months before the outbreak of World War II, and the need for Jews to leave Germany had become desperate. The British government had stopped almost all Jewish immigration, called Aliyah in Hebrew, to Palestine in 1936. Since other countries allowed very few Jews in, the Jewish population of Palestine had to find a way to save as many as they could. They started, quote, Immigration B, called Aliyah Beit in Hebrew. They created an underground organization that had a network all over Europe and part of the Middle East of activists, safe houses, assembly stations, and all that is needed to move tens or hundreds of thousands of people secretly and illegally through countries, over borders, and the Mediterranean Sea. As he said, I had left my kibbutz, Ramat HaKovesh, and lived in the port city of Haifa, and had joined the sea sports section of the Workers' Sport Club. In July 1939, a few of us were sent to Tel Aviv to take part in a sailing course. For our activities along the Palestinian coast, we had to get permission from the British authorities, and for that purpose, the course was camouflaged as a sea sport training. In reality, it was part of Aliyah Beit, and after completion, some of the fellows went on to become sea captains to be able to run a ship if necessary. During the course, we had a practice run, unloading a ship of refugees. One evening, we were bused to a lonely spot on the coast near a kibbutz. When we got off the bus, we scrambled down the steep sand cliffs to the shore. It had gotten dark by that time. There was no movement, not on the beach and not on the sea. The night was very still and peaceful. We lighted the kerosene lamp, which we had brought along, put it in a niche of the cliffs, sat down, and waited. One of the fellows had carried a big sack. It was filled with bread and a pistol. The bread was for the case that the ship would be surprised by the British Coastal Patrol and had to make a run for it. The pistol was for the case that there would be trouble with the captain or the crew. Some of those ships were tramps, owned and run by smugglers who were not Jewish and who took the refugees out for their money. Sometimes they backed out of the deal or got scared. Then they had to be obliged by force to keep the bargain, which incidentally had happened with this transport. Well, we sat down and waited. Suddenly, a dark shape appeared, and out on the sea, and slowly took on the form of a freighter, and we heard the anchor dropping with a splash. A little while later, a boat rowed up onto the beach, and out jumped two men. They were our men. We all ran to the boat. Our leaders hugged the two, and we all got in. The two were handed the sack. We rowed to the ship and climbed up the rope ladders. The deck was crowded with people holding suitcases, knapsacks, packages, and all sorts of luggage. We went straight down the davits and started to lower the lifeboats into the water and boarded them. Then the refugees began to come down the rope ladders. We had strict orders to take any baggage from them, if necessary by force, and stow them in the bow so as to make as much room for people as possible. I remember one young man remained standing and calling up to the ship's deck in German, "Miss Elsbeth, I have your coat here." He was made to sit down rudely. Some of our crew were nervous. One had already served time in prison for this sort of thing. When the boat was overloaded with people and luggage, we took off towards the shore. I sat in the bow, one foot on a piece of luggage, the other on a man's back, and rowed. We beached the boats, and our passengers had to jump into the shallow water and wade onto the beach with their baggage. Up there, local people waited already and spirited them away within minutes, and there was no trace left. The lifeboats, we rowed back to the ship right away, hauled them up, and proceeded to secure them. Suddenly, the dark night turned into blinding light. Everybody except I, Yeka that I am, waiting for orders, ran to the gunwales and began to jump down into one of the lifeboats left by the side of the ship, rolling in the somewhat choppy sea. I was also worried about dislocating my shoulder or getting caught between the ship's side and the boat. But then, watching everybody else, I jumped too, who wanted to be caught by the British Border Police. When we were a short distance away from the ship, somebody called in Hebrew from its bow, "Wait for me!" It was one of the lads who had accompanied the transport from Europe, but we couldn't return. The risk was too great. He was told to jump, but he shouted he could not swim. Use a life belt was our answer. Meanwhile, the searchlight had gone out again, and we reached the beach. We decided to form a chain and swim out to look for the kid. But soon the searchlight flared up again, and we turned back in a hurry. We spent the rest of the night in a gym at the kibbutz. The next morning, we were told that the kid had drifted to the shore somewhere further north alive. We all hoped it was true. Towards the end of the course, I got sick. I rolled on the floor on which we slept, what seemed to me for days, with terrible headaches and delirious. Eventually, a doctor was called, and he diagnosed typhoid. An ambulance brought me to the hospital for infectious diseases. There had been typhoid on the refugee ship, and I had had sick people on my boat. But it turned out later it was only paratyphoid. 2 months later, I joined the British Army. Out of money in 1939, Willi became the 9th person to sign up for the Palestinian Division of the British Army, thus being assigned to the unlikely low military service number 9. As part of a Royal Army Service Corps transport unit, he drove a supply truck, accompanying the British Army in the battles in the Western Desert, in North Africa, and in Italy. After the Germans retreated from Tobruk, Willi found this map in an abandoned German bunker. It shows the German and Italian military positions in Tobruk. Willi also served in Italy, where he got into a minor accident on this motorcycle when he turned his head to look at a pretty girl. Mild-mannered yet brave, our father saved the lives of several soldiers in January 1942 when he rushed heroically through stifling flames and continuing explosions into a cave of hidden ammunition. The officer in charge of that ammunition depot submitted Willi's name for the George Medal for Bravery, a high-level honor awarded to military personnel for gallant conduct that is not in the face of the enemy. When word came back on the submission, that officer ruefully informed Willi that higher-ups would not give such an important medal to a Jew, even if that Jew was the only one of 2 soldiers brave enough to risk his life to save the wounded. The single British officer who rushed in with Willi did get the medal. So did a few other British officers who had done nothing. He illustrated this issue of an Army magazine called Transports and Actions. The story's in Hebrew, but some of the drawings speak for themselves. The headline on the page with the soldier holding the baby reads, "Soldiers United." The first line says, quote, "Our enlisting in the Army was motivated by pressure and a conscientious need that the times have imposed on each and every one of us, and we could not behave any differently. Therefore, we also did not think about rewards for this act, and we did not ask anyone for thanks. We understood that there is no other way." The drawing in the upper right shows the Russian bear representing the Allies and the hawk representing the Nazis fighting over a map. Here's another drawing in the officer's mess. Interactions with female officers. And lastly, this one, which has always moved me. Peter, our father's close and handsome Army friend, wasn't able to visit his girlfriend one day. Phones were scarce in an undeveloped Palestine, so Peter asked Willi to deliver chocolates with an apology to her. That girlfriend was Branya, our mom, who Willi met that day. Peter was unfazed since he was on the lookout, on the hunt for a wealthy wife. As they courted from afar, Willi sent Branja illustrated letters in anticipation of seeing her again. In this one, he's flying off the train and into her arms. My mother, Branja, on the far right, on the far right, had left Vienna in 1935 at the age of 18. Coming from a very poor family, but always strong and independent, she found aid through a Zionist organization which helped young people emigrate to Palestine. Initially, she lived on a kibbutz, being trained to garden and grow food. While there, she was photographed for this calendar in which she and a few other women were featured. Eventually, she left the kibbutz to live in Tel Aviv, closer to her two sisters, who had also been able to get out of Vienna. Branja is on the far left. Their brother, the youngest child, was sent to safety in a Scotland boarding school and eventually joined his sisters in Palestine. But their parents, Rachel and Raphael, never made it out. None of their children ever learned the details of their parents' fate. Only recently did we come across any record of their fate. We only know that both parents were deported from Vienna to the Łódź ghetto in late 1941. They were among 20,000 Jews from the rest of German-occupied Europe who had been brought to Łódź by that time, along with almost 20,000 Jews from liquidated ghettos nearby, Polish towns and villages, as well as more than 5,000 Roma. Thereafter, we can only speculate as to where and how they met their end. There are two likely options. They could have been among the approximately 45,000 slave laborers in the ghetto who died of starvation, cold, and emaciation. Many who survived Łódź were deported to the Chełmno extermination camp after the, quote, final solution of the Jewish question, unquote, was made in 1942. Most of those prisoners were murdered upon arrival at Chełmno and later Auschwitz. Well, Willi and Branja got married on July 20th, 1945, while he was still in the army. They exchanged letters. In this one, Willi drew his commanding officer yelling at him, a mere private, to, quote, shut up and carry on. He wrote to our mom in German, but added a note in English at the bottom that says, also, dearest wife, keep your chin up, save your nerves, your strength, and your love for me, who will need it after this war, your boy. The translation of Buße ist der erste Schritt zum Heil on this is repentance is the first step to salvation. I'm not sure when or why Willi drew this, but he seemed to have a fascination with monks. We've always been in awe of our father's gift of drawing from his imagination. His talent for caricature also reflected his fine sense of humor. I was born in December 1948, on my mother's birthday, only 6.5 months after Israel declared independence. Dorit, my sister, was born 3 years later. While those years in Israel weren't easy ones, Willi was a young man in a new country, married now, with 2 children. He started drawing what he saw around him, as well as figures from his imagination in these quirky little watercolor sketches. Life went on. People went about their business, like this rabbi and his students. They flirted. They went to work. A few more, these are biblical and other story illustrations. After World War II ended, our father drove a truck for the Haganah in the War of Independence, which created the State of Israel in 1948. The Haganah was the Zionist paramilitary army, while Palestine was under British mandate. Sending Morse code messages was my mother's contribution to the Haganah campaign. After the war was over, Willi drove a commercial truck and then became a tour guide, which he enjoyed. He was an avid reader of history and a good storyteller. Tourists liked him. Ultimately, though, our parents weren't sure that staying in Israel, a fledgling state, would offer the opportunities they wanted for their children. In the center of this photo is our family, flanked by my mother's sisters with their families. The prospect of leaving loved ones and the stress at the thought of yet again starting a new life completely from scratch seems reflected in their faces.
Are you in front there?
Yes, in the dress. Mm-hmm. Willi's sister Hannah had married and lived in Chicago. Her well-to-do sister-in-law, a doctor, sponsored our family's immigration. It took 3 years to process our application, but in March of 1955, we boarded a freighter with capacity for about 30 passengers and sailed for America. After 2 weeks at sea, we arrived at the port of New York. From there, we boarded a train to Chicago to start a hard new life. Our parents were 40 and 38. I was 6, Dorit was 3. We arrived with next to nothing and moved into a slum apartment above a store. The self-help home, a mutual aid society where refugee survivors could find community and rebuild their lives, helped furnish the tiny space with secondhand donations. My father looked for jobs as a commercial artist, but couldn't find any. He worked at whatever he could find, first loading Coca-Cola trucks and then picking up and delivering laundry. The stress and strenuous manual labor resulted in his first heart attack 2 years later at the age of 42. He was unable to work for 3 months. My mother took a job as a sales clerk at Woolworths, trying to keep us afloat. I'm not sure when he made the next series of drawings, but as always, he keenly observed his environment and drew on his sense of humor to illustrate it, like the slightly randy old man peering over his glasses as a bird whisks away the drape off of a voluptuous statue. And 1950s teens flirting. Remember Bobby socks and greasers? Here's another monk. A random man. My dad would say to us, "See that man? Look at the contour of his face." Willi loved to play with words and language. He was entertained by a sign that said, "Stop men working." Playfully, he drew a passerby, wondering whether he should stop the men from working. He loved the circus, particularly clowns. As children, we met the famous sad clown, Emmett Kelly, when he walked around the grounds in trailers before a show at Soldiers Field. Here, the clown looks up at this scantily clad trapeze artist. A glimpse at an intersection could spark his imagination, like seeing a couple of women in the car behind us and turning it into a caricature. You can see his skill at storytelling in the following set of drawings, like the stagecoach. Don Quixote intrigued him. Once again, Willi's humorous side is displayed in the contrast between the roly-poly Sancho Panza and a nearly skeletal Don Quixote. This one brings to mind an accordionist who played for coins, which we threw from the gray painted back steps outside of our apartments in Chicago. We had upgraded to a 1-bedroom in South Shore by then, with our parents sleeping in the living room. From there, we continued to move every 5 years to somewhat nicer, larger apartments. By high school, Dorit and I were thrilled to get our own bedroom. After recovering from his heart attack, Willi was no longer able to do physical labor. He managed to find employment laying out catalogs and preparing negatives for print as a lithographer at a large printing company. An opaque red ink used in this exacting process became the ink our father used on slow days to create detailed little paintings on scrap film stock. He created all of these from his imagination with no references. His precision work as a lithographer was known in the trade as stripping. Dorit couldn't resist the urge to shock her friends with the revelation that her father was a stripper. And this delightful circus train, he also did. The conductor hanging off of the back of the train always, wait, I'm sorry. I want to go back one because I did not. I want to zoom in and pan through these for you. So, take a closer look at the details. Oh, I need to click on the slide, right. A bit later, he drew the snake charmer in pen and ink, and a fisherman on the waterfront of Lake Michigan. In his eulogy, the rabbi, who hadn't known our dad, but heard his story from us, pieced together a very good description of him. One passage read, quote, "A devout atheist, Willi's Jewishness was not played out in synagogue affiliation or religious observance, but in an unending quest for social justice. My father was not prepared for the racism he witnessed after our 1955 arrival in the U.S. and soon became a member of the NAACP. Always a supporter of the underdog, he could not accept the racism that plagues our nation. An early critic of the war in Vietnam, he participated in demonstrations against it and started drawing political cartoons again. While they maintained a deep Jewish identity, our parents raised us as secular Jews. Augusta was a believer, Willi never was. My mother, however, had been raised as an Orthodox Jew. Unable to reconcile the murder of 6 million Jews with the existence of a God, the Holocaust permanently destroyed her faith. General Westmoreland was reported to have said, quote, "Oh well, give us a couple more years and we'll have them convinced that democracy is the only way to live," unquote. By picturing Westmoreland in a killing field, Willi exposed the irony of the general statement. He drew this in support of a strike by bus drivers. Who's riding whom? This was for a pamphlet on National Brotherhood Week. That year it was from February 21st to the 27th. And the day after, February 28th. I suspect that he was inspired by satirist Tom Lehrer's song, National Brotherhood Week, in which the final lyric is, "It's only for a week, so have no fear. Be grateful that it doesn't last all year." Though his passionate political views often landed him in arguments, weakened his job security, and we believe earned him a file in J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, it also instilled in us, his daughters, a deep commitment to human rights. During a time when many young people were protesting against their parents' conservative mores, Doreen and I went to anti-war protests with our father. Willi supported Peace Now and Givat Haviva, two organizations dedicated to building Israeli and Arab mutual understanding. Other causes close to his heart were the American Indian College Fund and an American grassroots effort to rescue the threatened Ethiopian and Sudanese Jewish communities to resettle them in Israel. As a retiree in Dallas, he delivered Meals on Wheels, tutored Russian immigrants, and told his story to school groups at the Dallas Holocaust Museum. During that time, he was a member of Amnesty International and submitted this poster into a calendar competition. Family drawings began to arrive in letters around the time I went off to college. This dinner conversation was with Dorit. He said, "Remember, everything passes." And she replied, "Yeah, except me if I don't study." When we left home, our mom wrote us weekly, and we wrote back. When Dorit slacked off on writing, she received this drawing. I did not write my parents. My father wrote less often, so he sent this drawing once when he was feeling guilty. Guess what I didn't do? When our cousin Nurit defended her thesis to get her PhD in pharmacology, he sent her this drawing on a card. All who received one of his little drawings treasured them. Upon retirement, Willi started taking art classes. He loved Toulouse-Lautrec and drew the self-portrait in tribute. This beautifully rendered portrait of an art class model is another favorite of mine. Bronya and Willi enjoyed their later years in Chicago. They always loved visits with us and their grandchildren. In 1984, after our mom had become terminally ill, our parents accelerated a planned move to Dallas, where Dorit lived. Only 68, and as brave and gracious as she had been all her life, Bronya died a year later, in 1985. At peace that both daughters, who adored her, were settled into their lives and knowing that she would live on in their memories. In 1992, our dad traveled to Germany with Dorit, her husband Michael, and their daughter Rebecca. This is Michael and Rebecca looking out of a window in a Stendhal hotel. Willi enjoyed revisiting sites around Stendhal and shared his childhood memories. In a remarkable coincidence, there happened to be a reunion that week of his class at the Winkelmann Gymnasium. There he reconnected with a man who had defended him against anti-Semitic bullies when they were in high school. The man had become a Lutheran minister. Willi drew this statue of the unknown prisoner, a powerful memorial near the crematorium at the notorious Dachau concentration camp. Translated, the inscription reads, "To honor the dead, to warn the living." After each of us graduated college, Dorit and I moved to other states. Following a second heart attack at 58 and heart bypass surgery at 61, Willi suffered from severe clinical depression for the next 20 years. That was particularly hard on Dorit after our mother died, as she lived with her and her family, as he lived with her and her family for 10 years. In his later years, he was transformed into a far happier person after agreeing to ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. The treatment was miraculous for Willi, restoring him to enjoy the end of his life. Now less reclusive, he moved out of Dorit's house for his last 2 years and became the toast of the independent living facility. Even during the years he was depressed, Willi could be charming, often had a twinkle in his eye, and maintained a delightful sense of humor. Many people adored him, especially women. The last 9 months of my father's life were spent in and out of hospitals and rehab, surviving a nonstop series of health crises, much to the astonishment of his doctors. Following a hospital stay where Willi had signed a do not resuscitate order, a DNR, the nursing home to which he was transferred had neglected to have him sign an out-of-hospital DNR. He was 87 with advanced congestive heart failure. A couple of days later, grasping for air, he naturally nodded yes when asked if he wanted help breathing. Rushed to the ER, he was anesthetized and intubated for 2 days, leaving him unable to speak. Dorit was there. Through tears of frustration, she talked to the nurses about having him sign an out-of-hospital DNR. After they asked Dad if this was what he wanted, he and Dorit discussed alternatives and what his life would be like if he kept getting resuscitated and bounced back and forth between facilities. On this pad of paper, Willi wrote, "Will I be able to do my art?" Dorit said, "I just don't know." He wrote, "What do you suggest?" She said, "I think you should sign it." He signed it. 2 weeks later, he died. On an easel in his living room was a lovely, unfinished pastel portrait of a staff person at his retirement community. Even close to his end, as it had so many times before, creating art sustained him through life. Wherever we went as a family, we sketched while he pointed out whatever intrigued him. He taught us how to see and be curious about everything around us. In spite of his later depression, his zest for life could not be squelched. Thank you. So, yes, questions?
Did he learn English in Palestine from the British?
He had learned, yes, mostly. He had gotten a little bit of English when in Germany as part of school. In Europe, people learn English and other languages far more. But yes, he honed it in the British, in the army.
Mm-hmm. It seems like here there are a lot of lessons for us here today.
Yes.
We've got people disappearing off the streets and being deported for
yes.
their opinions and for their tattoos and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah.
The movie The Brutalist.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, I thought about that because of the store where you said, a store that were making furniture in the back and selling in
Yes.
the front, and that's came to mind. It's a really interesting film.
It's a fabulous film. It's a wonderful film. Yeah. 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 Any other questions?
How many times have
Yeah.
you been to the Holocaust Museum, Museum in Washington? Probably.
Actually, I'm a charter member, but I had not been in Washington, D.C. in so many years that the first time I was actually there was last fall. A year ago last fall, yeah. First time there. And as a charter member, I mean, they whisked us in and got a private tour of the facilities. I have been at the Holocaust Museum in Skokie, and I am a member of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, where we've donated. He started donating some of his papers already and letters from his parents, and we donated the rest, except for some pieces of art still. Mm-hmm. And what they did is, this wasn't part of the talk, but in 1990, my brother-in-law interviewed my father over 15 cassette tapes, recording it. And my father had an incredible memory for detail. And my brother-in-law is a lawyer, so he's very good at listening, through conversation, good questions and answers. And so the Dallas Holocaust Museum had graduate students transcribe those cassette tapes for us and also produce MP3 tapes for us to listen to. So we have been getting together on FaceTime once a week and editing them because there are some mistakes and things that we recognize and can look up. So we've learned even more detail from those as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes?
Your father was a very talented artist. It's really too bad he wasn't able to do that
to make a living.
To do it full-time.
Right, yeah, he would have loved to.
Even further.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he would have loved to do that. And he was very proud of his daughters. I became a medical illustrator, my sister a graphic designer, and my older son is a concept illustrator and set designer in the film industry, and my younger one's an interaction designer, but also draws and writes graphic novels on the side and illustrates them. So it's running through our family, and he was very proud of that. Mhm. Yes?
Do you think your father's tapes could be used for the hologram exhibit at the Scotland Museum?
Those holograms are made from live survivors, from people who are still alive. No, it's not. But he did give, the Show Up project, the Steven Spielberg is a continuous thing where he interviews as many survivors. He's done this for many years. And my father was interviewed for that. And there's over 4 hours, and it's available on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The hologram is amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you given this presentation at other locations?
Yes, I've given it several times. I gave it at the Temple, and I gave it at Richland Place a few years ago, and they've invited me to give it again, which I'll be doing on April 24th. And then I've given it to a number of friends, and at the JCC, to your group, as well as the lunch group there. And all in all, about 9 times, yeah.
But mainly in this area?
In Nashville.
It used to occur in New York and Washington.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah. My sister and I gave it together over Zoom to the staff, the archivist at the Dallas Holocaust Museum. We gave it there, on Zoom, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Have you posted any of his artwork online for public viewing?
I have not, no. This is being recorded, so it will be on YouTube, and that's really the first time it'll be online, yeah. Yeah, I started this out as a legacy for my sons and grandkids, and a way of preserving, his art, his story around his art. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, back there.
Is that, I see there's a book there, Running the British Blockade. Do you have a copy? Or?
That was the story that I read with a drawing that he made where I took different parts of it. And that was a story I read. That he wrote that. And he hasn't published it, but he's given this, his talk about that and about his experiences, several times, yeah.
What a wonderful tribute to
Thank
your
you.
father. It must feel really good every time you do this.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to put it together?
It's hard to estimate. I started out piecing it together over, I don't know, quite a few hours, several days. And then I took the background that I've got on each of them is also a drawing of his that kind of got broken up. And so I flopped that, and I used that as a slide, as a background for everything. And my sister, being a graphic designer, once I had all the photos in there and everything, she helped tweak, a little bit. And she's also an excellent editor. She wrote wonderful copies. So together she kind of art directed and edited what I had put together. And even last night, there was a couple passages we had found in those interviews, and I wanted to correct what we knew about my mother's parents and also the painter, about his studying briefly. So that we were putting those couple of slides and revising them last night, yeah. So yeah, many hours.
How many years ago did you start?
When did I give the talk at the Temple? 22?
Yeah.
22 maybe, but,
Yeah.
yeah, it was after the.
It was after COVID. It was to about 45 people there at the Temple, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think you did it again a couple of times at the JCC.
I did, yeah. And at the Temple, they scheduled it on November 9th, on Kristallnacht that year. And the one I'm giving at Richland Place on the 24th is on Holocaust Remembrance Day. So it'll be particularly meaningful, yeah. Yes?
The Tennessee State Museum has the War Museum closed right now for renovation. It will be opening in 2 years. We're talking to them now about it, exhibit there, World War II ending. And make sure you contact them too,
Yes,
to be in there, and I'll just have information.
yes, if you'll give it to me after this, that would be great, yes.
We'll be in there.
Yeah, do they give presentations there? Do they?
Yes.
Oh, that would be a wonderful place to give this, yeah. I would love to do that.
They don't know about it until we get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Delilah,
Yes.
talk a bit about your career. I'm fascinated because
Okay.
I thought they used X-rays.
Uh,
You know?
Medical illustration is a career for explaining to people to have an understanding of medicine, of surgery, of anatomy, and all of that. And my studies involved art, and then 2 years of medical school basic science courses, and then and specific training in medical illustration. And that was many years ago. And so I have, every year I update myself and add new skills. And at that time it was all hand-drawn and pen and ink and watercolor and airbrush. And now it's all digital. I work in Photoshop. But in many years, I illustrated many textbooks and journal articles for doctors to explain new surgical procedures. And then when I came to Nashville, I kind of switched over to medical legal work. And I still illustrated some books as well, but more of it was medical legal. And that's for primarily, most of it personal injury cases, but also some med mal cases, both defense and plaintiff, depending on and the perspective. So I love, there's a problem solving to how to communicate depending on your market that I love. And so I draw, anatomy, I draw surgical procedures, I draw injuries. If it's a fracture for medical legal cases, I will get the imaging and I'll draw, over the x-ray, and I'll enhance it with color and detail. And our MRI, all of this to clarify what somebody's looking at. And with textbooks, your audience is other doctors, and you don't have to orient them much. They know where they're at. With medical legal, it's to a jury, and so you've got to, it's a different perspective. You've got to show some orientation. Where's this at? Give some orientation, step-by-step procedures, keeping it simple but very accurate. Yeah. So I love it. I have a website that I can, give to you if you want to look at more of it.
Do you work at one of the hospitals?
No, I don't. I'm self-employed. I have a studio in my home. My first job was at Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse, New York. And I worked there for 7.5 years, and then I took it on my own. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much.